So it can be costly. I think it's costing her around $80,000 to do everything
for an ADU. Okay, so today's guest is Rick B. Albert.
That's right.
And you know what? You look a lot like that guy on YouTube.
I've had a couple views.
Yeah, a couple views on YouTube?
Yeah, just a couple.
Yeah, I was checking out your video earlier on ADUs because that's going to be today's topic. And the reason why I asked you to come in and talk about this is because you and I have had a few conversations recently, and you seem to be very knowledgeable about it, which means you have hands-on experience. I inspect ADUs, but I don't build them, and I haven't lived in one yet. So I think you got me beat 2-1 there. I think you've actually built one and lived in one, right?
Exactly. So we actually converted our garage to an accessory dwelling unit. My wife and I lived in the ADU and rented out the main house for about 2 years. And then now we live in the main house and rent out the ADU, and I help clients do the same.
Yeah. So let's talk about clients. You are a
realtor.
You are a realtor.
I am.
And
a good one, by the way.
Yes, you are a good one. And are you... you have your own business, or you just work under a brokerage?
Yeah, so I work under a brokerage, Lamerica Real Estate.
Okay.
We're a boutique firm based out of Sherman Oaks. But one of our kind of niches is working with people who want to build wealth. So we're actually affiliated with a developer that does new construction homes.
Right.
One of my very first jobs moving down to Los Angeles was actually going to the courthouse steps and bidding on foreclosures.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and starting that process. That was a trip in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have to bring a bat?
No, luckily not.
Wow, that must be, is it like, describe that for everybody. Is that like hectic? Is it like people screaming and yelling? Is it like people pushing? What was it about?
So at first it was a little daunting.
Yeah.
Because what it is you go to the courthouse and then it's essentially a live auction. So you can either, if let's say the starting price was 500,000, you can either say 10,000 over, or you can say 550, whatever. And so people were there. You had to have cashier's checks. So it wasn't like you could finance these properties. It wasn't like you can walk the property ahead of time. If there was people living in there, you were responsible for getting them out.
Right.
So, but no, it was fun. I have to admit, it was
a good
fun.
experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So you learned a lot from that.
Sure. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college. Here's $1.5 million. Let's go bid on property. I'm like, it's like the most money I ever had in my hands. I'm like, sure, why not?
Yeah, sure. I'll be right back.
Yeah, right. In Mexico.
Yeah. That's hilarious, man.
Yeah.
So the reason why ADUs is kind of fresh in my mind right now is because, I've been running into a lot of strange things. Mm-hmm. And that's just by, what I mean by that is showing up to work to do a home inspection. And then I show up and there's another building in the back. And I'm like, oh, by the way, did you guys want me to inspect that building in the back? Well, yeah, that's not part of your fee. I'm like, well, no, it's a different building. And the look on their face is like, oh my God, like, what do you mean you're not going to look at it? Well, I can look at it, but I'm not going to do it for free.
Right. So
I look at the realtor. Typically the realtors are scheduling me for their clients. Mm-hmm. So there's some bit of expectation between me and them, and I expect them to understand what an ADU is. And the fact that they didn't know it was there, I'm not quite buying that.
That seems odd.
I didn't know it
really
was
odd.
there, John. I'm like, what? How do you not know it was there? So this is your first time on the property as well as mine? Yes. Okay, so the listing mentioned nothing about an ADU or anything like that. Well, it's not permitted. Yeah, but it's still there. So in other words, if I was to walk straight in that direction, I'd probably bump into it. It's not like it doesn't exist because it doesn't exist on the county records. Okay, right. It's a building that's actually there. I can touch it. So that is mind blowing to me. That some of the responses I get, but I'm going to go one step better than that. This just recently happened a few weeks ago. I was called to do a property, and the square footage was approximately 2,300, and he says, yeah, it has 5 bedrooms and like 4 bathrooms. I'm like, how do you get that many bathrooms and bedrooms in that square footage? That's a lot. I said, is this a multifamily? No, it used to be a multifamily, but the flipper came in and turned it into a single family. I'm like, okay, I guess that could be interesting.
Yeah, some flippers do it.
Yeah, I don't, really have an opinion at that point. I'm like, well, okay, just has a lot of bedrooms, a lot of bathrooms. Here's the price, no problem. And I said, you sure there's no ADUs there? And once again, he reconfirmed there's no ADUs. But there are a couple of wet bars.
Well, why not?
I said, what do you mean there's a couple of wet bars? Well, yeah, there's a wet bar upstairs and there's a wet bar in the rear where one of the units used to be. I'm like, okay. So I show up, and this place is clearly laid out as a main house with a junior ADU still under the same roof, and then on the second floor, completely different unit. Their own entrances, their own electrical sub panels, their own kitchens. And he really thought it was a wet bar. You know why he thought that? Because the seller told him that. So I said, okay, that is where you put the range. See that big opening between the cabinets and that gas line coming out? That's where the cooktop goes.
Ridiculous.
This is where the refrigerator goes. You see that little box down there? That's where the lines come out. So there's definitely some, I don't know how to word this. It's like, what do I do now? It's like, okay, right. So this is obviously a multifamily house, regardless of what anybody says. So here we go again. Once again, it doesn't say it on paper, John, so it can't be. That's the mentality I'm getting and the logic behind from what they're saying.
Okay.
That's their logic. Their logic is they're only going off what it says on paper. But if they're actually standing there in the building, they can't compute that there's 3 kitchens.
I mean, you're inspecting the physical attributes of a property. So what are the physical attributes? Well, here's what it is. Like, to me, that makes sense. Right? Which is what I would explain to you, which for the record, you're inspecting a property for my clients tomorrow. There is an ADU on the property. So in case you come and say, I did not know.
Right.
I told you, and everybody's listening. Right.
But that's it. I'm not being told. I'm asking the right questions, but I'm not getting the right answers.
Right.
So yeah, it's like, it's a real head scratch. So, and that guy was about to, he goes, I got to take off for a little while. I'll be back. And then when he left is when I really had a chance to go through all the rooms and upstairs. I'm like, oh, this is definitely a multifamily. And I called him back. I said, you need to come back here. We need to talk. I said, I need more money for this if you want me to do all this. There was 4 electrical panels.
Wow.
There's 2 water heaters. 1, 2, what else? 2 laundry rooms. 3 kitchens. This was
it's a triplex.
Yeah, exactly. All under the same roof.
Yeah.
So that was the final one that got me to go, you know what? I need to talk about this. So that's why when I met you recently, through Ray Rodriguez, I went blank for a second there. Through Ray Rodriguez, who's recently on the show here. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times you had some experience with this stuff. So I thought, you know what? You'd be a good guest to have to cover all this. So you being a realtor, how long have you been a realtor?
I've been a realtor since 2012. I've been in real estate since 2010.
Oh, got it. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been around a minute. You know what's going on.
Yeah. I have a basic idea.
Yeah. So as far as ADUs go, first of all, ADU stands for auxiliary dwelling unit, otherwise known as a granny flat or a guest house or, whatever you want to call it. You can call it whatever you like. It doesn't matter. Now, as a home inspector, I'm talking about this in my perspective as being a home inspector. However, there's other aspects to it as well. So if you're looking to buy a house and it comes with an ADU, but it's not permitted, well, that's one situation. You may buy a house that has an ADU that is permitted. That's a different situation. And then you may be buying a property to maybe convert the garage to an ADU. I don't know why you would sacrifice your garage for an ADU, though. I'm a big fan of garages. I have stuff, and I need a garage, so I would never do that to my garage. But I will build an addition on the back of the garage.
Some people have done that.
Yeah, I'd do that so I can keep my garage. So your experience is you've probably dealt with all of it.
Yes. I actually had a client earlier this year buy a property where it was a 2-bed, 1-bath.
Right.
unpermitted. So my client is going in and getting it all permitted.
Right.
So that's happening to one of my clients. She's actually going through that process now.
Now, tell me about that in detail if you have details.
Sure.
Like is it costly? Is it all paperwork? What is it?
It's a mix of both.
All right.
So the problem is when you do any sort of construction without permits, you're also running the risk of what is to code.
Right.
And things may not be to code, or worse yet, things might be to code when it was done, but because there's no permits, every year codes change.
Right.
And it's not like the city inspectors are like, well, even though you built it illegally a couple of years ago, we're going to let it slide. So for my client, there was a couple things she had to do. First, yes, she had to get the architectural plans done.
Right.
So an architect will go in and she'll draw up the plans. Here's what's proposed. So 2-bed, 1-bath, but also what's existing. So that way the city can compare. So,
okay, so now to be clear, this is a house that already has an ADU that wasn't permitted.
Correct.
So she still has to submit plans for what she wants it to look like because she's going to change it?
Correct.
Okay.
Because there were things not done to code.
I see.
So when you are converting a garage, as long as it's within the property lines, generally the city doesn't care. But any additions you do has to be within the required setbacks.
Sure.
Which is
4 feet. Yeah. 4
exactly.
feet. Yep.
Well, this one wasn't. So she was going to have to move a wall of about 2 feet in, and it was about 15 feet of just the portion that would be new construction. So that cost, I think, around $15,000.
Wow.
Right. So there was that work that needed to be done. The doors were only 30 inches instead of 32 inches per code. So there had to be reframing done.
I believe you and I ran into some of
Yeah,
that.
we did, which is why I knew immediately as I saw it. I'm like, that's not right because I just learned about this.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of that work that had to be done. So we had to go back to the seller and ask for a price reduction.
Yeah.
Because we're like, look, you told us that even though this was done without permits, you said it was done to code. It wasn't.
Whose code? Morse code?
Right? Oh my gosh. But yeah, you're right. So like there's all those problems.
Right.
Luckily, it did actually have its own sewer line.
Right.
So that was fine. But yeah, so you have to pay for the permits, the architectural fees, and then if there's anything not done to code, which is always tough because every inspector's different, and they might say you need to start opening up walls.
Right.
To see if the foundation was done correctly, shear walls, anything like that.
Right.
So it can be costly. I think it's costing her around $80,000 to do everything.
For an ADU?
Yes, and that includes also remodeling it.
Okay,
so she is redoing the kitchen, redoing the bathroom.
Gold toilets and everything?
No, labor and materials are just up. This just is what it is.
Wow.
I think she's also moving the hot water heater,
right?
Things like that. Luckily, there's solar panels on it, so there's no need to separate.
And how big is this unit?
It'll be about 730 square feet.
Oh my God, that is so small.
For a 2-bed, 1-bath?
Dude, that's a lot. What, 2-bed? I thought it had to be at least 850 square feet.
They're figuring out a way around it.
Wow. Because I've been reading up on LA and Burbank. As far as what's required for certain sizes. Yeah,
the 850 might be for new construction. And this one technically would be an addition off the garage.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And so, it was existing.
Right. So that's probably the workaround. And of course, this all goes without saying, building codes change every year. What happens next year? I mean, when I built mine, we had just closed, and I was under the impression I can run my sewer line to the back of my house because my garage was in the back.
Right.
So I was like, okay, $3,000, right? Just to run the sewer line, connect it to the main house and move on.
Right.
And then they're like, no, building codes changed. You have to run a line all the way down your driveway and then connect it in the front of the house.
Yeah, I read up on that too. And I believe it said, okay, let's see. ADU may connect to the building sewer from the existing building at a point 2 feet outside of the existing building. So it's I guess if it's a brand new build, it's going to be one way, and if it's already there, it can be another way. But I've inspected properties where And that's how it is. They Y together.
Exactly.
Like in the driveway or something like that. The house is here, the ADU's back here, and they just kind of come together like this.
Right.
Which is cool. So
And
that's
then,
one of the topics that I want to cover a little more in depth later too.
for sure. And there's ways to save money on that as well, which we can go over.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So when we did ours, they're like, well, we're going to have to bust up the driveway, but we just have to cut a section.
Yeah.
But then we're going to have to re-pour concrete. That's like $1,200.
And then you have a line in your driveway.
Right. So I was like, what if you cut just in the middle and we compact it, make sure everything's safe, and then just put rocks over it? So it actually looks decorative.
Ah, yeah.
And that might have cost me what, like $100, right? For the rocks.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we can do that. So now people come to my property and they actually think it's all decorative because there's just the gravel in the middle. So it's like, okay, you just drive on both sides.
Work with what you got, man.
That's exactly what you do when you're on a budget.
Yeah. That would be a budget install right there.
That's right.
Yeah, that's cool. So as far as a home inspector goes, when we show up to a property and we don't know there's an ADU, and the reason why we charge more, especially if I'm doing your sewer line too, I need to run my line from the ADU out past the house too. So that's 2 separate entries I got to do. So that's why things cost more money.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
It's just more work. I think it's totally reasonable. And you know, just inspecting the ADU, if it's a legit ADU and it actually has all the components it needs, like a heat source, which is a heating and cooling system. Typically, if they put a heater in, they have a cooling side too. It's
right.
Nowadays, it's a mini split heat pump system, which is great. They work good. I'm not a big fan of what that looks like on the wall. It looks like something that belongs in a meat locker or something.
Oh, there you go.
That's what that looks like.
Point. That is a good point.
That's what that looks like, and that's what that reminds me of. Remember, I don't know, back in the day, you walk into some stores and they have the big fan that blows air to keep the flies out.
Oh, yeah.
That's what that looks like. So that keeps haunting me when I see one. I'm like, that looks just like it belongs somewhere else.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't belong here, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, but yeah, so if it has an HVAC system, which it probably does, it's going to have its own sub panel in most cases, and its own water heater.
Yeah.
So those are more things that have to be looked at. You know, we're checking the house water heater, and now we got to check the extra house water heater, and we got to check the extra house panel. It takes time. I mean, it could be another 45 minutes on that ADU if it's not too bad,
right?
You know, if it's done correctly. But I want to go back a little bit because you brought up the ADU wasn't permitted. So a lot of people get really freaked out over that when something's not permitted. So I like to be clear on that. And what I mean by that is when there's not a permit done on something that was installed on your house, it means there's no oversight.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's wrong necessarily. So if the people you hire are not the cheapest guy on the list, chances are whatever they installed, they probably installed correctly. A lot of contractors tend to do this. Well, let's just put it in and get it working. So they only do the minimal amount of work to get it working. Now, just because the HVAC system is actually turning on does not mean it's working properly.
Right.
Another misconception right there. So those are things I like to just drill into people and say, look, don't freak out over this. The most expensive parts are here. You just need someone to come in and fine tune it. Basically, it's the best way to describe it. Like Ray's house, he had the new unit. I believe he had 2 new.
The furnace and the AC were newer.
Yeah, but the ducting was just a mess, and the return plenum and all that stuff. So that's just cleanup work, basically.
Yeah. It was. I think we got a bid for about $2,500. It's like you'll live.
Yeah, you'll live, exactly. So so that's my point about my point today was just to get the message out to realtors. Really check and see if that's the case. If you can't make it to the property before the inspections come, you got to do some research and just because you look bad. You look really bad. Yeah. I'm sorry to say this, but you are going to look really bad if I have to say, oh, by the way, there's an ADU out back. Oh, there is? How do you not know that? You're the representative.
I agree. And some of this stuff's super basic. There's actually a house on the market right now where the agents are advertising that there's an ADU on the property. And I was like, okay, this could be interesting. So I checked it out before I showed it to clients. I immediately knew it wasn't permitted.
Right.
Like they didn't have even like some of the basic stuff, like it didn't have its own address, its own mailbox.
Right.
And I was like, So I quickly, through the LADBS, Los Angeles Department of Building Safety, on their app, typed in the address. I'm like, yeah, there's no permit for this. Right. They're advertising it that there's an ADU. But I'm like, yeah, there isn't here. No. So now I'm trying to find a client where I'm like, we can renegotiate the price really well on this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of you're right, they don't know. And I've actually been able to help get offers accepted because of it, because the realtors don't know. So I go and say, look, I understand you don't know this process, but I do. I can help you get through this.
So let me tell you how it's going to go.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. And there was, okay, yeah, we'll go with you. And I'm like, sweet.
Yeah. So, look, experience is great, man.
It does.
If you have the knowledge, you got to let people know you have the knowledge.
I agree.
Let's talk a little bit more about knowledge. Yesterday, I had a very bad day.
I'm sorry.
I had a very bad day. I was feeling very sad. I went to a house yesterday for a very good client of mine who hires me all the time. He's actually someone similar to you, realtor, broker. I mean, he does all kinds of stuff. And everything's going great. The homeowner's there. He's really cool with talking about hot rods and stuff and whatever. You know, everything's going great. And then his realtor shows up. Walks up to me. I'm in the bathroom, looking at one of the bathrooms. Walks up to me and pulls out his card. Here's my email address. You make sure, like said it like that, like he was my dad. You make sure you take out the trash. It was almost like that from my dad. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
He's like, you make sure you email me that report. I'm like, no, sir, I'm not emailing you that report. He went into like shock and just started yelling at me.
Oh, wow.
He's like, yes, you have to do that by law. You have to do that. I'm like, no, I don't know what law you're talking about. But in the real world, I'm not sending you that report. And I was trying to be nice and funny about it. Right. I wasn't trying to be combative. And he just got madder and madder. I said, sir, enough. I need to get back to work here. You are not my client. And then he said, before he left the bathroom, he said, that report is for my client. I'm like, no, it is not for your client. It is for my client, who is the buyer.
Oh, this. Okay.
Yeah, man. He was like, wow. He was on some kind of...
Why do you want the report?
Anyway, he thought I was obligated to give him the report. But so let me clear that up with everybody listening. Hell no. The home inspector is hired by the client who is about to buy the house. The contract for that inspection is between the inspection company and the client who is buying the house. We are not obligated to give that to anybody. Once we give it to the client who paid for it, they can then send it to the world if they like. We are not obligated, so don't ever tell me I have to send you a report again. That one is not going to happen. That's no way to get a report out of me, number one.
Right? Not a good impression.
Not a good first impression. So I'm like, okay, this is probably going to escalate. Mm-hmm. So my buyer had taken off to go to his office, which wasn't far. I texted, hey, you need to come back here. Help. He comes back. He goes, what's going on? I says, go talk to this guy. And he walks up. He goes, oh, I need to get that report. He goes, no, sir. I get the report. I'm the client. He said it exactly how he was supposed to. I was so proud of him. He said it exactly how I related already.
Yeah.
And then he goes, oh, wow, I really thought. I'm like, well, okay, you believed him, but you didn't believe me.
Well, what do you know? You only do this every day.
What would I know, right? And he goes, John, I'm sorry, you're right. I said, I know I'm right. I had to rub it in his nose a little bit. And then from that point on, he was calm as a cucumber. It was very nice to me. And I guess I commanded his respect after that. So it was like really unnecessary for him to react that way, but it was kind of a moment.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 points to that. So the purchase contract states that any reports that a buyer receives does need to go to the seller. Mm-hmm. So that may be where he was coming from. But again, buyer to seller. And then the second point is like, as a listing agent, like I just sold a property we're closing today. We actually just closed a couple hours ago. It's like, I actually put in the counter offers. I don't want the report because I don't want the knowledge.
Are you sure there's not a gray area there where the report doesn't exactly have to go to the sellers? Because what if someone hires me to do the inspection? I give them a report and they say, you know what? We don't want to go any further. Why do they have to give that to them?
They don't have to.
Right.
It's really on the buyer's side.
That's what I mean. So it's
Yeah.
not required for them, only if they want to do a request for repairs. Then they'll use that. Then now the seller has it. And now they know what's going on. And now they have to disclose it.
Exactly.
So there's a catch there.
It is. That's why we don't always want them. Sometimes we don't mind.
Yeah.
In this particular case, because it was actually my personal property. It was condo I owned. I didn't want that knowledge.
Yeah.
Not that I was concerned. I had remodeled it. It was a new AC, all of that. But it's just, I just don't need it. In the event that it falls out of escrow, then I go to another buyer, whatever it is.
Right.
I just want to start clean.
Right. So that's a little education for you guys listening right now, because boys and girls, listen up, because what we just talked about is all a play of words.
Yep.
But it's legit. It's totally legit. What I just said about me and my relationship to my customer, between our contract and then who they give it to, that's up to them. It's their property. Yeah. Now, a lot of times, you've probably heard this before, but I'll have people call me, oh, yeah, I can't seem to open my port. Can you resend it? I'm like, yeah, what's your name? Oh, my name's Susan Wilson. Oh, okay, Susan. Which address is this? Oh, hang on, let me look it up. Oh, it's funny, your name's not on the client name, under the client name. So who are you? Oh, well, okay, I got to go. Bye. They try to use someone else's report. They try to call me because now the people that hired me walked away from the deal.
Got it. So they're trying to save money.
They want me to send my report that I did, a month or 2 months ago. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. Oh, can't we just pay you? No, I already got paid. I wouldn't feel good if someone did that to me, so I would not do that to somebody.
Is there also, could you make the argument that a property can change over time?
Absolutely. That would be my next line of defense. Well, if I needed a defense. I don't need a defense, but I just tell them, sorry, I can't do that. Oh, well, I don't understand why you can't. And then someone yell at me. It's so funny. And I'm just like, bye.
Yeah. I've had the same inspector go through the same property more than once and catch something the second time.
Yeah.
It's happened.
We're just humans, man.
Exactly.
We're not robots. We make mistakes. We can get distracted like that. Hey, John, can you come look at this real quick? And just as I'm about to walk up to something, and then I forget what I was doing earlier.
Sure.
It happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's called human error.
Right.